This is me. My name is ERIK LERNESTÅL. I'm a photographer at the Statens Historiska Museer, which would translate into something like National Historical Museums. We are a whole bunch of museums, actually. 6 of them, and a large outfit of archaeologists as well. But today I'm going to talk about one of the smaller museums in our agency, the Hallwyl Museum. The Hallwyl Museum is located in the center of Stockholm at number 4 Hamngatan. And it was built as a winter home for the immensely rich couple Walter and Wilhelmina from Hallwyl, and was completed in 1898. This palatial residence is now one of the city's most eccentric and engaging museums. Behind the facade, the 40 rooms, as originally furnished by Wilhelmina herself, stands as a unique testimonial of the lifestyle and decor of the late Victorian period in Sweden. However, the museum is quite inaccessible to people that are not able to climb the many stairs, walk the many stairs throughout the house, and due to the fact that the house is a preserved time capsule from the turn of the last century, no elevator has ever been installed. In the fall of 2017, we launched a project with the ambition to digitally try to lower that threshold, or so to speak. Using photogrammetry with 3D scanned all of the first floor staterooms, which is 10 in total. For the task, I used a simple consumer camera array, cameras from Panasonic. You only need one camera, of course, but using several speeds up the capturing process, and it makes you look cool. So, yeah, major coolness, and this is how it's done, basically. Just taking lots and lots of images. This is a pass I did, like standing height, and then you do it from a lower angle and from the highest angle you can possibly achieve with a tripod. And then you throw these into a software that's called reality capture, and you get something like this. After 4 days of computing in the computer. We then published the 3D models on Sketchfab. And my colleague, Sara Dixon, and I, and myself, we used the built-in annotation feature in Sketchfab to add text information in English, and added links and articles on Wikipedia, and to high-resolution images that we already had on Wikimedia Commons, to enable visitors and viewers to immerse themselves even further into the history of the house and the people who lived and worked there. We also added sound in form of the pre-existing audio guide. Parallel to this, we created copies of the same 3D model and embedded them onto the museum's website. And together with the Swedish audio guide, and a Swedish audio guide produced especially for children. Openness and accessibility are core values in our organization, and has been for many years now. We have tens of thousands of high-res 2D images available under open licensing through Wikimedia Commons and Europeana. It all started with a mass upload of over 40,000 images back in 2013. It therefore came natural for us to apply the same licenses to our 3D models, and also to make them downloadable. Here's our digital ecosystem surrounding our 3D models, if you will. We have always used like searching for established platforms and publish our material there, and then link them together. And in this case, with the 3D models, we've used Sketchfab as the hub, in a way. So we have information about the museum on Commons, and then on Wikipedia, and I took a bunch of pictures and used this Capturing Reality. Is the company that makes the software that's called Reality Capture. Yeah, they turn that around. And then we linked our resources on Commons to the models and from Wikipedia, and we used Imager to link in some images that we had tweaked a little bit to suit this kind of presentation, and we embedded the 3D models on our own web page, and we also used SoundCloud to link in these embed audio guides on the museum's website. And here is a little side loop that I will come back to in a while. Today, the rooms, the 10 or 11 it is 3D models of the rooms from the Halville Museum has been viewed over 150,000 times now, and but what's most interesting is they have been downloaded over 16,000 times, which is more than a 10% download rate. But where do they all go? Almost immediately after publishing, we started to see cases of reuse of our 3D models. And here's one of my favorite examples to date. It's Thomas Flynn, who downloaded all the models, resized them, and shrunk them down to be able to fit them all into one model that will give you a much, much better view and feel of how the floor is laid out. And he also put it on top of this original floor plan from the museum. And when you Google yourself, as we all do sometimes, after seeing all the downloads, you like Google the Halville Museum and 3D Halville Museum VR and stuff like that, see what comes up. And one day, this hit me.
Hello, where's it going? I found the unknown Sun Museum the other day. So I feel like introducing it for you. This museum named the Hollywood House. It built in 1898 at Stockholm, Sweden. Let me see. Shall we dance?
What the heck, right? I Googled some more and found out that the Halville Museum now existed as a world on something called VR Chat. VR Chat is a social reality platform with user-created content, and it's currently the largest platform of its kind with over 4 million users. Some of you might remember Second Life. This is the third life, maybe. So it works both in VR with headsets and on desktop. And is available online through Steam, and now even on the Oculus headsets. I learned that the Halbel world was created by someone who I'm still only known as Tiger Chips. After some efforts, I was able to get in touch with said Tiger Chips and learned that the person in question had just found our 3D models on Sketchfab, liked them, and saw the potential as a world on VR chat, and just got to work. Tiger Chips resides in northern England and wishes to remain anonymous. I of course respect that, but it's also kind of frustrating because I would like to give them proper credit. But at the same time, it's also kind of intriguing, not knowing. So this is how the world looks when you find it on VRChat. And then this is how the world that Tiger Chips created looks like. So they have added features like candlelight, windows or glass surfaces, and lights and fires and in the fireplaces. Yeah. Chandeliers. Yep. This is how it looks when I explore it in desktop mode. So you can pick up this candle at the start, and then they have adapted the annotations that we've made in Sketchfab, just copied the text and put them in as signs in the VR world. And now there's even possible to start and pause the audio guide that was also on Sketchfab. And it's even possible to sit down in the furniture, and so it's like a video game basically. Yeah, goodbye to you. And here's a video of not me exploring the Halbel Museum. So there's a woman speaking Japanese, so I took the liberty or the precaution to mute the sound if she uses foul language or something. These images are all from Twitter, posted by visitors to the VR world. And we're obviously kind of big in Japan because almost all of these tweets are in Japanese. And yeah, the Halbel Museum in VR chat seems to really engage people, and sometimes it's really crowded in there as well. So it's basically a place to hang out and chat and whatever. Here's a comment. And people adding on and avatars like that. And yeah, yo, Abe. And it's just a lot of it out there. And it's great to follow. So this brings us back to this, that you of course memorized before. And so we jump to here somewhere. To date, the world on VRChat has been visited more than 56,000 times, combined with over 150,000 views of the 3D models on Sketchfab and the 16,000 downloads. Makes this the most successful digital production to ever come out of the Halbel Museum. And just to compare, the physical museum has about 150,000 visitors in a year. And I think this is a really good example of open data and the power of open data, and that if you give to the community will give back. The last little twist to this story is this arrow here. We're currently exploring the possibilities of hosting our own guided tours in the VR world that Tiger Chips created, with our own guides, and create a custom avatar that looks the same, has the same historical clothes that the guides at the museum have. We're struggling to get this going, but hopefully soon. And if we get that to fly, we've basically reached out so far that we poke ourselves in the back. Yeah. Thank you for listening. And you can follow the QR code to my Twitter if you like. I'll also put the link to the app and the code to the for the 3D viewer in the museum there as well soon. I have no questions for myself. Thomas.
Why did you start exploring 3D in the first place?
Because we could. Basically, it was there, and we wanted to try it. I first encountered, I've obviously known about the concept 3D and 3D scanning for a while, but when we encountered it in the museum space was at a digital conference called Digital Heritage in Granada, Spain, in 2015. And that's when we decided we can do this better than hiring someone. And we did that together, first in a project together with the National Heritage Board. Yeah, it went from there basically. And we created, the second model we did was that the helmet with the face, if you've seen that. And it just went from there. And now we're thinking about how are we going to archive 3D material in file formats, and are we even going to save the whole data sets with all the images, and yeah.
Yes, thank you very much for this brilliant presentation. I'm just without words, but if you have any advice for other museums that want to do something similar, what would that be?
Just do it. I mean, you have to have some basic skills in photography, and you need somewhat of a computer, like a gaming computer is fine. You can do it on a laptop. There's lots of free software. There's lots of very expensive software and equipment as well. But I started using the camera that I use for work, and I had an old MacBook Pro. I actually had that running for 5 days to compute the first model with like fans on it and stuff. But it worked. And there's even, like, you can upload your images to the cloud and get a 3D model back. So what I want to promote is that it's not high tech anymore. This is consumer level stuff. So it's pretty easy if you just dare to do it. More questions? No? Thank you.
Okay. Okay. I'm gonna probably go very fast through this. I specifically made the presentation so that you can look at it later. It's full of links and other things you can look at. But thanks for having me here. Sharing is caring. Thanks to Eric for the invitation and to Karen for organizing all of this. It's been really great for me because my background isn't in licensing and open access. So it's been great to fill my brain with this kind of stuff. My background is I worked at the British Museum and published their first online collection of 3D models on Sketchfab. I co-founded a company called Museum in a Box, and I joined Sketchfab a couple of years ago. So these slides are a bit of a mishmash, but it's about a bit about 3D digitization, a bit about licensing, a bit about startups, and like I say, resources for you to look at. So that's if you want to look at the presentation. I've already tweeted it as well on the hashtag, but you can find it there as well. Don't listen to me. There are very interesting, much more interesting people working at the intersection of 3D and cultural heritage. Morcin Aliari, an Iranian artist, in doing my research for this presentation, there's a really good interview with her where she talked about when we say we're releasing something for everyone to use, sometimes we're actually talking about a much narrower group of people, and it's really worth a read because not everybody has internet access, or not everybody has a 3D printer. So we should kind of keep that in mind within the context of 3D. The Museum of British Colonialism, its first project focuses on the Kenyan Mau Mau emergency in the 1950s, and 3D work by Chao Tayani, drawing attention to often overlooked part of British history. So all of these are kind of, I guess, how do I want to say it? People have done museum work for themselves. They're not an institution, which I think is really nice as well. Abira Hussain, co-production of 3D has formed part of Abira's work, creating a Somali digital archive, and Museum in a Box. George Oates has been doing amazing work to take that project so much further. There's a pilot of small portable museums around the world, and that's my time. So, okay. So quickly, to keep in the back of your mind, 3D is an image format. It's a medium. So it's not VR, it's not AR, it's not all of these things. All of these things are built on top of 3D. So try and think of it as just a medium and what that can do or not for your institution. How we use the medium is up to us. It's not decided by anybody in this room. It's not decided by Sketchfab. Sketchfab is still a very small company, and you can email me if you think Sketchfab should do something differently, or if you need a new feature. You can get in contact. We're people on the end of email addresses. We're not a huge company where you won't get listened to. If you're interested in 3D for cultural heritage, these will have links on the online presentation. Go and look these up and join in and join the conversation. Some have regular calls and lots of resources for you to look at. There's also over 100 cultural heritage spotlights on the Sketchfab blog, people talking in their own words about how and why they use 3D for cultural heritage. So, Sketchfab. Sketchfab is an online platform to publish and find 3D models. That's essentially what it is. There's lots of people on the platform, there's lots of 3D models on the platform, and a lot of people looking at those 3D models. Essentially, the idea is to make it easy for you to get your 3D from wherever you're creating it or capturing it into Sketchfab, and then view it online, publish it online, but also connect it up to so that it can travel on beyond Sketchfab as well. So it was nice again seeing the way how well scans were used. So there's an API that's kind of taken care of for you to connect your databases to, or your software to, that lets you upload the content. And on the other side, there's a lot of support for direct import of 3D content from Sketchfab into 3D creation software, whether that's VR or AR and other softwares. I've got a lot of slides, so I'll be rushing, so do ask me anything. afterwards. How do we make money? Through subscriptions to the service. You can pay for a subscription to upload larger models, to have more annotations. There is a cultural heritage offer of free pro accounts and 50% discount on premium and business accounts, and you can do different things with them. And also we have the Sketchfab store, which is royalty-free licensing of 3D content. The idea there being that if you're going to buy 3D content, you should be looking at it in 3D to know what you're buying. Generally, other marketplaces, you look at an image and then you buy the 3D file, whereas with Sketchfab you can explore the object. 13. Open access and commercial licensing. I'll just talk about this very briefly. Is it possible? Is it non-rivalrous? I learned that yesterday. Can you do both? And the work that John was doing, scanning Christie's, and yet the same thing was sold. I think this is an interesting thing. Like, is it possible? Is it when legally and ethically it's allowed? You know, how could you do that? What could you do with that? With 3D, we can talk about high-resolution master data and optimized data assets. Could that be a way to explore offering content for free reuse and also an income for your museum? This is a quick map published by the Museum Association in the UK. It's the museums that have closed in the UK since 2013. So if you're in a big national museum, your funding is maybe more secure. But if you're a tiny museum, then there's perhaps a bigger need to have independent funding. Some stats. These are all the numbers about Sketchfab. This encompasses cultural heritage on Sketchfab, so different, not just museums, but different projects that are using the platform to upload 3D. Here is a pie chart of all of the user segments, so whether it's a 3D designer, an architect, people can choose that when they sign up, and this is the whole of the community, and then this is museums. So you can see that it's a small part, but we think it's an important part of what Sketchfab does. It not only provides goodwill to us as a platform, but it also validates 3D as a medium, I think, as well. We just passed 100,000 models in the cultural heritage and history category. With that in mind, about 50% of models on Sketchfab are categorized, so this number is probably a lot higher. Also, it's a user-based platform, so not everything in the cultural heritage category necessarily would fit a standard definition of cultural heritage. And often I go on to try and educate the community of, like, I don't think this, treasure chest that you've made up from your game is cultural heritage, and then we have an argument about the definition of cultural heritage, which is quite fun. 17,000 of those are downloadable under Creative Commons licenses. We currently don't support Creative Commons 0. If you think we should, email me. The more requests we get for things, then the more likely we are to look at implementing it. And cultural heritage is the third most downloaded category on our platform as well. And this is what you see when you download a model. You can get the original file, but also a converted GLTF format, which is a transformation format. So when you upload something, it's transcoded into a different format that is designed to be imported into all kinds of modern software. But the original is also there. I put this in because I felt yesterday that there's just so much stuff coming at me. And I know that 3D, for a lot of people in museums, it's not a massive priority, but it's an interesting thing to look at. And it can feel a bit like this sometimes when you're just trying to do everything. And just the redefinition of museums, like open access and digitization. And then some guy comes along and is like, let's do 3D. Like, well... But if you have the will, it is definitely easy. So pick your battles, I guess, or don't try to catch fish. I don't know what we recently did or conducted a survey of cultural heritage users on the platform. There's a link to the results there, but just to pull out a couple of the responses. Who creates your 3D content? The highest response was, I create the 3D myself. It's part of my job. And I think that to me suggests that there is an opportunity for a role within museums as a 3D artist, the same way that we have photographers. Capturing is one part of it, but post-production, editing, people go to university to study this. There's an opportunity there, whether it's co-production or if it's a paid role. You know, that's up to your organization. Co-production as open access, you know, this idea of like giving people access to being a museum, to being part of the museum. It's not just, you know, this part, publishing and reusing, we often talk about, but what about here? How can people join in the planning and the digitization and the post-production? And we've heard a bit about that. Oh, this has gone wrong. There are 3 other examples behind here, but I wanted to get the Hunt Museum in as well. These are Vancouver iTech Preparatory School children created 3D, older children created the 3D, and younger children recorded audio and published it on Sketchfab of local museum content. You can't see an image of Derby museums. They have volunteers helping them create 3D content. And the British Museum, Object Journeys, which is where I met Abira. We did some training around photogrammetry, and she's kind of continued using that as part of her practice. And then the Hunt Museum, in collaboration with Digital Heritage Age, you know, you can get people involved in the process. Oh, there it is. Well, there you go. It was in reverse. Do you offer your 3D models for download? Most people said yes. So this is jumping back to the survey results. Do you offer your 3D models under Creative Commons licenses? There's more questions around this topic, but I just pulled this one out because why don't you offer 3D? It's lack of control over how it's reused. So there's definitely still that mentality in a lot of museums. The people that replied to this, they're not all museums. They're archives and education projects, a bit like that big list of all the different people that make up cultural heritage on Sketchfab. But yeah, dive into the results yourself and draw your own conclusions, I think. Some tips, have a plan. Andrea yesterday showed Hoa Hakan and I from the British Museum, and that's a 3D scan that I had made when I was there, and the same as ERIK. I just knew I could do it, so I did it. And you know, I think now I'm more educated in the idea of like, well, when you digitize something, that's an important decision. And I think now that the talk around 3D isn't like, how do you do that? Like, that's amazing. What's your process? It's well, what does it mean to digitize in 3D and then to release and all that follows. Prepare your 3D assets for viewing and reuse. This is very important for Sketchfab, but also for any other use down the line. The minimum formula, as few faces as possible, color and a normal map. That would be my suggestion to everyone making 3D. If you're feeling fancy, add a roughness and ambient occlusion map. Don't know what those are? This is where you might want to get somebody involved in the production of your work, because it will mean people can download it very fast and it will look good. That's also important. And then also spend as much time and care on your 3D as you do with your image content. I think it's not a throwaway medium. It can be a really useful part, I think, of different elements of your organization's work, whether that's outreach, education, conservation, commercial activities. I don't know what that means anymore. Do you want to reply, read it out to the? We're almost done, and then I'll stop. This is a new one for us, using videos on social media. I talk about 3D as an interactive medium, and I think it's important to experience 3D as an interactive experience as opposed to just an image. But we have found that using video on social media is a great way to engage people with the content. Sketchfab is supported in feed on Twitter and on Facebook, but currently video and imagery is the only autoplay media. So it's just that one click that makes a difference that people don't do. But when we show videos, we get much higher engagement with what we're posting. 2D assets can be used to create 3D if you've got open access 2D image collections. Let's see what happens when I click this. These are some experiments that I've been doing. I hope this works. So this is a dish, obviously. Now let's see. So this is like the blank shape 3D. And what we can do is, these images are from the Met, by the way. And oh, tick. Get rid of that. Come on, prove that you know what you're doing. Base color, there we go, sorry. And what we can do is we can swap out the images, hopefully. Did not test this. Oh. What? Anyway, I'm not going to keep showing you this, but there's a link to it that you can try in your own time. I don't know what I've done here. That you can swap between the different dishes and experience them in 3D. I've actually got a whole collection of different 2D to 3D public domain content that you can explore in different ways, and animations, things that you can do in 3D that you can't do with 2D. Let's wrap this up. I don't know how to get back to full screen, so we'll just do it like this. I'm done. That's kind of it. As I say, this hopefully is giving you some food for thought, but it's just also the beginning, hopefully, of your interaction with me, with Sketchfab, and with some of these ideas. So thank you. Is that time okay?
So thank you, Thomas. One thing that really stood out to me in your presentation was that tiny part of Sketchfab that was cultural heritage or museums. But then later you said that, was it cultural heritage models are the third most downloaded category of models? I think that is so kind of interesting. Why do you think that is?
I think people are interested in cultural heritage. I think that's a simple. It's the stuff. It's the 3D models that are related to real life, and I think that is what people get a hold of. And this idea of ownership is still very strong, and the idea that I could download something and 3D print it or own it, or just have the file to do what I want with it is pretty powerful still, I think, and fairly new.
That's why we all should be doing 3D modeling and apply open licenses to share our collections. More question for Thomas?
You said normal maps were kind of minimal, and I've been looking around at museums, not as much as you, I guess, but I only found ERIK's model that had a bump map and nothing else anywhere. Do you know how many actually has that, or is it?
Yeah, there are a few accounts that do. The Malopska Virtual Museum Project, which is a digitization hub. So 40 museums in Poland bring their objects to the hub, and they have a great, there's a blog post about this. They have a photogrammetry team, a 3D editing team, and an editorial team, and I love that separation of the process. So they have great models optimized for online. Also, the RMN Grand Palais photo agency produce some high quality 3D as well, and they've sort of looked at that. But generally, no. And actually, ERIK's is a cheat because he's just reused the color texture in the bump map, but it looks amazing, so that's okay.
That's because I don't know what I'm doing, basically. I'm just guessing, and it looks good. Yeah, more question. We have time. Yeah, no? Any questions from the internet, Ville? No? David?
So you do the cultural heritage outreach at Sketchfab. So do you, is it possible to sort of get in touch with you and invite you pay you perhaps to hold a workshop so that we can actually learn what was it called again? A color map is? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, a normal map. Or basically, can you come? Can you offer some sort of training support from Sketchfab?
I would suggest, instead of paying me, that you might want to look at what you could do with that money using Sketchfab. So for the service, or for one thing, I've got a new baby on the way in our family, so I'm not going to be traveling anywhere for a while. But the alternative is not the alternative, but I think online resources are something that I've been long wanting to find some time. But when you work at a small company, you're doing a billion things every day. So that's, I think, the way forward as a resource. But always happy to get on a Skype to explain things with people. That cuts down traveling, and so yeah, definitely happy. And it doesn't need to be a paid thing.
That's what we did.
You can call me and ask me, but I genuinely do prefer. This is just a personal thing to not travel. But I would think all the resources that we have on the Sketchfab blog, for example, are worth exploring. And if I can signpost people to the right stuff and explain how stuff works, I'm very happy to do that. You can, I like I say, I respond to emails and like that. But I don't know, I'm sounding like I don't want to go anywhere. I like staying at home. I like just being at my house.
Well, thank you very much. So now we're actually ahead of schedule. How crazy is that? Stå upp, stand up, yeah. Have a, what do you call it? Yeah. Vila med kraft kallar vi det. Det är du.
Nej, jag tror att det går. Inte, jag tror jag ska...
Alrighty then. Thank you, Karin. And Antje, just to follow up on your question to Thomas, if he would like to travel, we're thinking about hosting some kind of workshop on 3D here, maybe this year, November, December. That's mostly, of course, for locals, but if you would like to travel, you would get an invite. That goes for everyone, of course. Okay, next speaker, Sofia DAHLQUIST from Stockholmskällan, a fantastic tool to explore Stockholm and its history. Take it away.
Oh, wow, thank you. My name is Sofia. I'm very happy to be here to meet you all and to also meet you all sitting at your desks and in your homes, in your sofas. I work with this website. It's called Stockholmskällan. If you should learn only one word in English, this is it, Stockholmskällan. The sources of Stockholm, or the Stockholm source. And if you're are a bit tired of this room, if it feels a bit too dark and you want to go and explore the outside, you could go into Stockholmskällan, go to my Twitter account, and there is a direct link, so you can explore it. So, I work as a coordinator and editor and educator in this website. And it's a website with historical artifacts and sources from and about Stockholm. And imagine that you were outside, you were walking this street, and you were thinking, oh, I wonder, how did it look at this exactly spot before? Have you ever felt that? Of course you have, because you're working in museums and most of you are like interested in the historical stuff. And on Stockholmskällan, you can do that. This is Odenplan. I don't know if you've been. Today is a very central spot in the middle of the Stockholm, a really good area for commuting, changing trains, changing to the undergrounds and buses and so on. But it hasn't always been like that. About 100 years ago, this was a very remote area. They actually called this place Siberia, because it was nothing there. And you can see that the city has been changing a lot, but some are the same. Example for this commercial stand in the middle. I will get back to this photo later on. So, Stockholmskällan, or the sources of Stockholm, or Stockholm source, is rather much a museum without walls in your pocket. And using your iPhone or smartphone, you can walk around the city of Stockholm and explore the history on site. Or you can use the website. It looks like this. Here you have access to about 30,000 sources, photos, drawings, etc. It's not a huge database, but the material is hand-picked to fit our purpose. And you can discover the history of Stockholm and its citizens during hundreds of years. So, what kind of materials do we have? Here are some of the categories where you can see it, and the numbers, they are growing all the time because our talented librarians, archivists and museum workers are all the time putting in more material about Stockholm's. And it's not a big collection, but they are all hand-picked and special for this environment. This year we have a special focus. We want to focus more on the national minorities in Stockholm, because we discovered that we don't have that much information and sources of their history. And we want to add on to that perspective as well. So this year we are this is our main focus. So in the end of the year, there will be even more sources to make this perspective more visible and their history more accessible. We are also presenting the sources, the material, in bigger theme articles. This is also a way to access the database. And the themes are, it could be like a big theme, like the industrial history in Stockholm, or it could be just about when the Vasa ship sank. So bigger and smaller articles, and it's all about like to make the data a bit more accessible, to make it curated in those articles, and to make the history more understandable. Why are we doing this? Why are we curating our material? Why are we putting those sources online? Why are we writing articles about it? Our main target group is the school. I'm working at the education department in Stockholm, and our aim is to support the school with primary sources, with artifacts from the Stockholm history, and also with examples how you can use this material in the school. So we are working very closely with the schools, me and my team. We are 3 persons working at the editorial staff in Stockholmskällan. We are visiting classroom, we are meeting teachers, we are doing inspired workshop, how to use this material, and we're also doing lessons plan, ready to use in the classroom. And in this year we have a special offer for all the schools. They could come, we can come and visit them, and they could choose between 3 different themes: source criticisms, use and misuse of history, or one more like how history is made. And we come to the classroom and we are doing a lesson together with the teacher and the students. And our aim with this is to inspire more schools, more teachers, to get a broader audience in Stockholm to actually then go themselves and using this material in their classrooms. And this has been super popular. This year we've been to 62 schools. We met over 3,000 students between the age 7, like the really young ones, up to the gymnasium, like 18, 19-year-olds. And we also met a lot of teachers doing this, and then they are then taking this further and doing their own lessons with our materials. And the schools, they are situated all over Stockholm, so it's not only like the inner city schools, it's like from the outskirts and kind of everywhere. So I will give you an example from the source criticism lesson. What do you see? Now it's time for you to be active. What do you see? Train, power lines. I didn't hear. Yes, exactly. Skeppsholmen. 2 churches. Where are we standing? Where am I standing here? Slussen. For you who's not from Stockholm, Slussen is what you say, a hot potato. It's always been a hot potato. Today is the messiest place in Stockholm because they're always like rebuilding this place. And it will be finished somewhere, I don't know, 2025, something like that. In 1898, did this place look like this? That's the question for the students to answer. Is this a true picture of Stockholm about 100 years ago? What do you think? How can you answer that question? You can, for example, compare it with another source, a photograph. from more or less the same time. Tram going up a very steep hill. Have you been to the City Museum yet? It's time to go if you have some extra time. Then you can actually go and look on this painting for real. That's right, Frida? Yep. The City Museum is just situated over there. And then you can also compare it with a map from that time, more or less. And then try to figure out, where am I standing? Where are those people standing? Where is the tram going up? This is the thing that the students, the pupils, will think about during this lesson. Here, Brunnsbacken is the tram going up a very steep hill at that time. And you're standing somewhere at Peter Myndes backe. So this is an example. And this lesson, we've done it with the 7-year-olds. They are picking out things kind of similar actually to the old students that are about 18, 19 years old. They have a bit different focus, but they could still, work with this lesson. And is it a true picture of Stockholm? What do you think? You're so polite. Yeah, that's the question. Yes or no? Maybe. Probably. So, cooperation is the key. And this is really the case with Stockholmskällan. Cooperation is the key. We're not doing this alone. Stockholmskällan consists of 3 different departments in the city of Stockholm. You have the Department of Culture, where holds the City Museum and the City Library. You have the City Archives and the Department of Education, where I actually work, where our office is situated. And I think this is a kind of interesting combination with different departments. We also have some external organization working with us, and we're doing this for the schools. These are our main target group, the schools. When we are writing text, when we are doing lessons, these are our main target group. But, of course, there's lots and lots of other people also using Stockholmskällan because it's easy to use. The texts are understandable, the links are understandable, and a little bit if you design something for a 12-year-old, it could be good for anyone. And also I think like the education actually working together with the cultural institutions as the museums, archives and library. I think that is also a quite uncommon combination, and I think that is one of the key to our success. And that we all share the same outcome, creating the best for the schools. So, our aim. We want to add on to the general history of Stockholm as it is presented in most history books, using micro-level stories from ordinary people. For example, this letter from a 10-year-old to her parents telling her about the summer holiday at her grandparents' house. Is to meet the school's curricula, and the selection of the material follows the outline of the Swedish curricula. And teachers, not only in Stockholm, but actually all over Sweden, are using the material in their classroom. And also, when we develop the version you see now of Stockholmskällan, this website, a few years ago, we were also very much outside in the classroom talking to students and talking to teachers and trying out so the website would fit their purpose. We also want to increase the knowledge and interest of history among everybody. And in Stockholmskällan, the language it's very easy, or should be easy, for anyone. And a little bit again, if you design something for a young student, it's understandable for anyone. And also the historical connections are also easy to understand, that you can find some materials and then go on to the next one. I will show you an example of that later on. And also, I said that our primary target group is the school. It's a bit hard to measure how big like the percentage are actually the schools, but we can see like on using Google Analytics that our school pages where the teachers can find lessons examples and so on, they are growing about 100% every year. So yeah, that's very good. And also the rest of the website has about over 500,000 unique users every year. And I think that's kind of good numbers as well. And we also want to present many voices in Stockholmskällan. We are both presenting many perspectives of the history and also many different kinds of material and artifacts. I showed you before, like photos, police reports, letters, songs, maps. They are all connected in one website. And I will now show you how it works if you're interested to go out, use your smartphone in the streets of Stockholm. My colleague Samuel will show you how this works. Maybe. So, thank you, Samuel. If we go back to Odenplan again and the picture, this is a picture from Stockholmskällan. Here you are presented to the photograph or the object or the map or whatever. Here is the meta information that is connected if you scroll down. And first you have the heading telling you that this is Odengatan österut, hörnet av Norrtullsgatan. This is all in Swedish now, but if you use Google Chrome, often it offers you to translate it automatically, and it works okay. I think it's not perfect, but if you want to get a sense of what's actually in there, it could be a good thing. Here you have the context and the background about this photo. And I think that's often the thing that is not, if you're in a museum database, often that's not the case, that you get that much context and information about this actual photo. And I think that's the important thing. If you're using this in your classroom or if you're using it in the education, you want to know more than only this is a photo of Odenplan. We have the date, the year, 1902. you can also see where in Stockholm this is situated. I will show you that in a minute. And we have some meta information, some various tags. Often they are a bit more than in this example. Scrolling down, you will find out the contact information and also which institution that holds the original, because Stockholmskällan is not an archive. We only hold material from other archives, like the city archives, like the city museums, like the Royal Library, and so on. And you can also see what kind of Creative Commons license we use. And it's been a lot of talk about these things during those days. And for the school, everything is free to use. You can use it as they want to. So that's, as a teacher, you should be very secure when you're using Stockholmskällan, that this is free. You can use it as you like with your students in the classroom. As a student, you could use it when doing an essay or so on. And most of the material is tagged CC BY. We also like to recommend our users other kinds of materials that they may be interested in. For example, this is a discussion about building a city library in this part, and actually today there is a city library in this area. So this text is just a few years after the photo was taken, 1913. And you can see where the photo is. Where exactly in Stockholm is this photo from? Here is a modern map of Stockholm. Today, idag, this is Odenplan, the little triangular square. And we could go back in time. 1909 is from the same where the photo was taken, more or less. You can compare the two maps with each other. And actually this function, comparing maps, is our most popular feature in Stockholmskällan. You can go back to the 1625, I think is the oldest one, and then go to present day. And if you're interested in what other kinds of material we have in Stockholmskällan that relates to this part, more or less, you will find a lot of other sources here. For example, here is some of the materials that connect to this actual place. You have a painting with its surroundings, 1784. You have a song about this area. More modern time, just a few years ago, about 10 years ago actually, we have a book. We have a photo that it's the one in the corner from 1894. It's taken from one of the first balloon rides in Stockholm, overlooking this part. And we have a photo, kind of present photo from this area. You see the building with red flags hanging out of the windows. This is actually a protest that was going on in this area a few years ago about building a shopping mall in this area. And actually they succeeded, or there were no shopping mall in this area. And we have the prince, Prince Bertil. Maybe he had some costumes here, I don't know. But here he's cutting the ribbon, opening up the metro station in 1952. And we also have another book that's about this area. And to summarize this, by combining individual items like those, connecting them in time and in space, Stockholmskällan helps you see the greater picture. Thank you.
Tack, Sofia.
Thank you.
Thank you. How many people are there working with Stockholm Källan and enriching the data?
The editorial staff, it's me, my colleague Samuel and Martin. We are working with schools, we are like taking care of all the digital, like developing new things that we want to build in. We're not building it ourselves, but like all the editorial, we are also writing articles and so on. But then we have about maybe 15 to 20 people around the city in different museums, archives, and library. Maybe you could, some of you are actually here. You could stand up, who are like, yeah. The other ones are really hard working with Stockholm Källan right now. They are like publishing the sources, like the photographs and archive materials. I'm not doing that, but we are together deciding what kind of materials. For example, this year we are focused on national minorities, then we are doing that together. But then all the institutions, they are publishing their own sources and also explaining the sources and doing the meta informations and so on.
Okay. And obviously Stockholm Källan is about how Stockholm looked in the past. But how are you thinking about like images and maps of today, and how to incorporate that, or yeah, basically how are you thinking around that?
I think it would be super interesting to like be able in some way to use that kind of materials as well. But our material, as I said before, Stockholm Källan, it's not their own. We're not an archive. We only hold material from other institutions. So, for example, if the City Museum are doing something with the present day, or if the other museums, then they could actually put them inside Stockholm Källan. And we're also doing, I didn't mention that, but a few years ago we had a collaboration with Wikimedia Sverige and a project called Wiki Welcome, where students all over Stockholm were writing and searching information from their neighborhood. And then we used Platser. Platser doesn't exist anymore, but we have Minnen instead, like an open platform where anyone could like publish a present photo. And then they wrote fact texts about their places in Wikimini. So we're trying also to not invent another system, like use the already existing platforms. And we have also talked about maybe couldn't you use like Wikipedia instead, like for the articles and so on. But our experience is that Wikipedia is too hard to understand for our target group. And that's how it is. It's very good if you want to then learn even more and so on, but only to rely on Wikipedia, it's not really working if you're under 12 years old, maybe. But we did a project with Wikimini, and maybe, I don't know if you heard about Wikimini, you should absolutely check it out, it's fantastic. And maybe if that grows, it would be maybe do something, because then it's an open platform, just like Wikipedia, but it's for kids instead. It's fantastic.
All right. More questions for Sofia? Karin?
Yeah, thank you very much. You said that you collaborate with schools and tailor lesson plans and so on, but that the aim really is also to connect them closer to the original sources, is that right? Do you follow up if, you know, after that tailor-made lesson, will it affect the way they teach in the future? Have you followed that kind of work?
We are actually, because when we are out now, because we're doing such a huge project like now with those like huge number of meetings, we are actually they will get the question, did this, okay, what do you think about like the standard question, but also did this lesson change, or will this lesson change your methodology, like while teaching history in your classroom? and they would like, probably, not that probably, like they in their answer, they will like measure what they think will happen. But then we will do like in 6 months or so on, we will come back to all the classrooms, like all the teachers that we met with the same question. Did it change your, are you using Stockholmskällan more? Are you, to see if this is a good thing to do? Because our aim is not actually to be, you know, in the classroom working with the students. It's the teacher's job. We want to support the teachers. So more or less like the teachers is our primary target group in a way, in that sense. But to get more teachers involved, I think this is a very good project, because then they can see how they could actually work with these kind of sources in their classroom, and they could like inspire each other and talk about it. Just good, you know, be out in the school for a day, meet a bunch of different teachers, sit in the their cafe and drink coffee and talk about it. It's a very good to be actually, because I feel like my background is from the museum sector, been working with the education in the museum, like meeting classes actually in the museum. But I think it's very good to actually go out in the schools, in the classroom, to like a little bit like face the reality. I think, yeah, because it's so easy to say, just put it online and the school can work with it, but what happens? Do you know what happens in the classroom? No, many of us, I don't think we know that. So I think go out in the schools. It's a good experience.
One last question.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Sebastian from the City Museum of Berlin.
Oh.
Thanks for a talk. I could imagine that your system could be easily applicable to each and every other city in the world. So are there other cities or administrations or museums from other parts of the world talking to you? Is it possible to get the system as a kind of white label, so to say, to use it in other cities?
Actually, we got a lot of questions. We also got a lot of questions from Sweden as well. They're trying to do a Göteborgskällan or a Malmökällan, and other from other. You can. I'm not this super technician about this kind of thing, but it's really hard. We can't really like. It's not like a finished product that you could just like take in another environment, but you could be like inspired what we, you know, like the system, kind of like the process and so on. But I could also, because I'm not an expert on those kinds of stuff, you can come and ask me and I could provide you with the right information.
Thank you, Sofia. Now we have Sandra FAUCONNIERS from the Wikimedia Foundation. You work with GLAM, Wikimedia, and you're about to tell us of where do we go from here? Do you want the headset or do you want fine with the mic? You take that and I'll bring your presentation.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I'm Sandra. I work for the Wikimedia Foundation. I actually live in the Netherlands. My background is an art historian. I've worked in the cultural sector on digital and online projects since the late 1990s already. And since 2.5 years, I work for the Wikimedia Foundation, which is the organization in San Francisco that kind of also takes care of the servers that Wikipedia runs on. But we also have a GLAM team. And from that perspective, no, okay. Should be fine. Okay, but I don't see my own, that's fine. I will manage, yes. So in my presentation, I will tell a bit, a little bit like a flashback on the history of GLAMWiki. I think many people in this room, I heard so many mentions of Wikipedia in the, thank you so much, fantastic, thanks. I heard so many mentions of Wikipedia in the past presentations that I think that many people in the room here have done some kind of partnerships with either Wikimedia Sweden or another chapter if you're coming from another country. Can I just see a show of hands how many people here have some of their collection materials on Wikimedia Commons, and oh, fantastic. So my introduction will be short then, because you know what this stuff is about, but that's good. But I also want to take a look forward. My role actually at the Wikimedia Foundation is, we are not like a chapter in the sense that we are more kind of a facilitator for what happens in the rest of the movement, and we help the rest of the movement to do things. And my role normally is working on a project called Structured Data and Commons. I will just say a little bit about that. But we also look a bit at the bigger picture, and we try to see, what's happening and where should we help and where should we push. And from that perspective, I will try to give you a bit of insight in what we see as challenges for the future and what we hope to do. And I'm very curious to hear if you, agree with that, and/or you have other questions. So, yeah, I will very, very much welcome your questions and comments at the end. Yes, I will. Is this better? Yes. I have a silent voice, I know. Okay, so Wikipedia, everyone knows Wikipedia, and many of you probably have Wikipedia articles around your collections and/or your institutions. I think most of you will also be aware that there's not just Wikipedia, but Wikipedia is in fact part of a bigger ecosystem of projects, a family of projects, the Wikimedia projects. Some of your collections will be on Wikimedia Commons or media repository. Maybe some of you will have collections data or other kind of data on Wikidata or knowledge base. And maybe some of you will have worked with some of these other projects too. And they all share the same goal. They all are the same ecosystem. They work well with each other. They are integrated with each other. And behind them is a community of people, a worldwide community of tens of thousands of people who at some point have sat together and thought, what is our goal? Why are we doing this? Wikipedia writing and publishing free knowledge online and making it available for the public. And this is the vision statement that actually is shared among all these projects, shared among the movement, the Wikimedia movement, is imagine a world in which every single human being can freely share in the sum of all knowledge. That's a very lofty goal, but it's in fact very similar to what the heritage sector is doing, what cultural institutions are doing. I come from that sector myself, and I've always felt very aligned with what Wikimedia is doing. I'm also a volunteer Wikimedian for a long time. So there is a very much a shared base, and that's actually why I think we, as the Wikimedia movement, Wikimedians have been working with people like you, with the cultural heritage sector for quite a long time already. This shared notion of sharing knowledge with the world and this vision about that. We have a global community, it's quite important to know that. So we don't just have English Wikipedia and Swedish Wikipedia and Finnish Wikipedia, etc. But we in fact have volunteers, people working on our projects around the world. And we also have like sub-communities interested in nerdy things like GLAM, cultural heritage. This is just a small part of our GLAM Wiki community. And maybe you will see some familiar faces there. This is a photo from 2015. When we had a conference in The Hague, actually. We have had another conference later. But yeah, these are the kinds of people that you probably also work with when you do Wikimedia, or Wikimedia-related projects with your collections. You often work either with volunteers who are Wikipedians, and/or you work with your local Wikimedia affiliates. You might work with Wikimedia Sweden, Wikimedia Finland, etc., etc. And just a flashback, blast from the past. If we look back at all the GLAM Wiki projects that have happened with organizations like yours, there have been hundreds of them around the world. I don't really have count of it. Actually, we plan to do a bigger research next year to actually keep a bit track of how many there have been and what kind of collaborations there have been. But they have been going on since, I would almost say, the mid-2000s. And the first steps were actually just volunteers and Wikimedians going into museums, probably even at times when there was not really large-scale digitization yet, or there were not really fully-fledged open access policies yet, and just volunteers going into museums with permission and making photographs for Wikimedia Commons for illustrating Wikipedia articles. But then soon there came formal collaborations, just probably like the ones that you have had, formal projects like media donations to Wikimedia Commons, and just one signature one, and I really apologize that I haven't taken a Swedish example, but I'm very sorry, but I have more Swedish examples later. I will talk about Sweden more, but yeah, one of the like first big ones that we know about in our movement has been the collaboration in Germany with the Bundesarchiv, and that has brought many historical photos that have illustrated Wikipedia articles at a very large scale. And the reason why we know that cultural institutions work with us is, of course, Wikipedia is a top 5 or a top 10 website, right? It has a lot of visitors. This is an example of a media donation by a museum where, in the country where I live, the Netherlands. Actually also a very early one from the Tropen Museum, the National Museum of World Cultures is their current name. And for instance, some of their materials are being used in quite, general Wikipedia articles. This one is about the topic of monoliths and their cultural use. And if you look at the page views, that Wikipedia article got in the past 3 months, 53,000 views. So that's actually a big reason why institutions like you work with us, because it helps, to make your collections known to the world. It makes them very visible to a large audience and also to unexpected audiences in contexts where maybe otherwise your collection would not show up. And this is just also a slide to give a nod back to Loic, who gave a keynote. Like it can sometimes be much higher numbers than on your own collection website. And yeah, that can only help increase the reach of your collections, I would say. It doesn't mean that your own collection website has no value. I think it has a totally different purpose, I would say. It's a totally different environment where your heritage, your collection shows up. But when we look at that, and especially with my team and our community, the GLAM Wiki community, it's of course fantastic that we can offer you this platform and then that you can work with us to have more reach for your collections, but we also hope that it's also for other reasons that we actually want to push also. So not just for eyeballs, but what we think is it's contributing to a shared commons that anyone can use. It makes the material, of course, more findable for people to reuse, but it's also very importantly a place for dialogue with communities. It's a place where Wikimedia projects are really, for me, very much about the people and the people that are there and the people that discuss and talk about knowledge and sometimes even question knowledge. And that's the kind of dialogue that can take place on our platforms and that we really offer for that purpose as well. And we also offer the context of the world at large. Like the photograph of the monolith that I just showed you, it shows up in the context of the broader cultural history of monoliths. So that's the context that hopefully our projects can offer. So looking at that past and at that context, what kind of challenges lie ahead? What kind of things do we expect that the future will bring? What kind of questions and answers do we think we need? Well, maybe a bit of context, the Wikimedia movement, also these tens of thousands of people around the world, we are currently in a quite stressful process. I'm actually personally not super involved in it. Other people are more involved in it than I am, and it is a very challenging and interesting and wild process. We are in the process of building our strategy for the next 10 years and more. We are in a whole trajectory already more than a year, I think already 2 years and counting, where we want to define, okay, where do we want to be as Wikimedia projects, as Wikipedia, as this ecosystem in 2030. And we have already managed to establish like a central strategy vision. By 2030, Wikimedia will become the essential infrastructure of the ecosystem of free knowledge. And very importantly, anyone who shares our vision will be able to join us. This is really central. Here you see that we place really central that we want to be a service also to partners. We want to be an infrastructure that others can use, that can be an infrastructure to help others share knowledge. And in that context, one development that we see, and that is quite interesting and sometimes a bit overwhelming also, is one of our youngest projects in this ecosystem is Wikidata. I don't know if people in the room are familiar with it, or maybe some of you are already working with it. But that is in fact, Wikidata was founded in 2012, and it is a knowledge base. It's in fact our linked open data knowledge base, you could say. It has, at this moment, more than 50 million concepts in its multilingual concepts. Everything that has a Wikipedia article in the world has a Wikidata item. So everything, this building, this museum, maybe some collection items in this museum, but also the concepts like the earth. Many notable people have items there, but people can also import to it. So it also contains entire art collections that have been imported there. That shared knowledge base, it has grown very exponentially and has also been adopted quite strongly by heritage institutions. I think that it's very connected to also the drive towards linked open data that we see. What we see is that many heritage institutions, and especially smaller museums, we see a pattern that they use it as a linked open data publication platform. For instance, in Belgium, that's a big thing. What happens is also it's got big adoption or quite large-scale adoption among national libraries. Actually, after the Wikimedia conference, which took place in Stockholm here 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, we had a day of like a collaboration workshop day with national libraries from around Europe and even from the Library of Congress, who are starting to use Wikidata as a shared knowledge base for also authority control and for helping making authority control multilingual, linking linked open data. So for them, it's becoming more like infrastructure. So we are seeing that besides Wikipedia, we are getting other platforms in our ecosystem that are becoming quite useful for the sector. Now, we often get the question also like, is Wikidata then the place where all the data should go? No, definitely not. It's just technically not possible, but also it's not the community for that. I think it's kind of a summary of the most notable and reusable data that can be useful for the world at large. But apart from that, you of course have thousands and tens of thousands of use cases where you have specific linked open data stores, and maybe or your institution has one. But what we see also as a development is that Wikibase, the software behind Wikidata, is also becoming adopted by many institutions as software for their linked open data projects. Here's just a few links to, we have a few blog posts about specific kinds of uses for Wikibase. So that's also a development that we see that some of our software, not only our platforms, but some of our software is also being used. And then, yeah, just a quick glance at the project that I'm involved in, most of my working hours at Foundation. We are also working towards making Wikidata useful for the Wiki ecosystem as a whole. And our flagship project at this moment is called Structured Data on Wikimedia Commons. That means that we are integrating Wikidata, the multilingual data from Wikidata, the multilingual data items, also to describe files on Wikimedia Commons. It's brand new. Actually, our search function that uses this in a multilingual way is not live yet. So what you see here is just like the current like code-based search function. What it does, it looks for all the images that show a blue jay, kind of birds, which I think is native to Europe, I'm not sure. But anyone, when our search function is live, hopefully quite soon, anyone using any kind of language description of that bird or even the Latin name should be able to find the same results. So it's in fact additional data to Wikimedia. That whole structured data, Wikidata-based ecosystem is kind of a new development for us, and something that we really want to support also in the light of wanting to be an infrastructure that is useful for as many partner institutions as possible. One good example of Wikidata is maybe a project that you may have heard of. It's kind of famous. It's called Sum of All Paintings. Besides gathering, donations of data by institutions, we also have a very active volunteer community on Wikidata, and we have a group of volunteers who very enthusiastically collect data about notable paintings around the world, and they import it into Wikidata. So when you maybe on your website publish CC0 data about your collection, it's very well possible that your paintings will be on Wikidata already because volunteers have spontaneously collected them. At this moment, there's these crazy volunteers. I'm one of them. I'm not so active. It's actually my colleague Maarten, who is very, very active there, have imported like 417,000 paintings. And yeah, Wikidata itself is also a source of linked open data and with APIs that can be used to do all kinds of development on top of it. We also see at hackathons and we see volunteer developers doing interesting things with it. This is an interface called Krotos, built by a French volunteer who actually in his day job works for the Louvre, if I'm not mistaken. And he has created an art browser on top of Wikidata. So you can browse by collection, but you can also browse by theme. And this is just a selection of paintings showing a thunderstorm, for instance, or you could look for blue jays or whatever in any language because it's multilingual. But I want to actually kind of segue into a different topic, a different challenge that we see. So Wikidata is interesting, you can ask it all kinds of questions. It has a query engine if you're into that kind of stuff. And for instance, you can ask it, give me all the museums in the world for which we have paintings on Wikidata. And then you can put all that nicely on a map with geo-coordinates. And here you start to see, okay, it's nice that we collect all these paintings on Wikidata and that we have this community that does that really voluntarily. But there's a little bit of a gap there, right? We have a big concentration in kind of the usual suspect countries that we can assume they have painting collections, but it shows a lot of cultural bias. And this is what I'm hinting at. A second pillar, I think, of what we are currently thinking about in the Wikimedia movement about our strategy for the future is knowledge equity. Our community is super aware that whatever is on Wikipedia at this moment does not really represent the world at large. It does not represent the knowledge of the world at large. So the second pillar of our strategy is not just going to be offer infrastructure for the world to build with and common infrastructure that people can use, but we also want to work towards knowledge equity. And that's a very big challenge because then we are talking about, you know, all the people in the world. Some of them might not even have digital devices yet or might only have access via mobile. How can they contribute this knowledge? How can they work with Wikimedia projects? How can they work with you also? So what is it? That's the kind of questions that we are starting to ask, and it's really just starting to ask the question. I have to be very modest about that. What does it mean to do GLAM Wiki work in a truly global way, not just with institutions who have already digitized materials, not just with institutions who have the technical, like digital capacity, but with, you know, any institution around the world, with any volunteer around the world who wants to work around culture. And we do see patterns. One pattern that we see is that it is a bit counterintuitive, but that for many regions in the world, digitization even still needs to happen, or our volunteer communities are still very keen on digitizing their core cultural heritage, and they are very willing to also work on it themselves. In some of these volunteer groups around the world, in India, for instance. In Armenia, we also see it. Latin America, it's very important. We see communities digitizing stuff themselves, sometimes even from private collections. Sometimes it happens in collaboration with institutions and sometimes even with national libraries, etc. So it's a mixed bag of volunteer initiative and actually formal collaborations. And that actually means that one of our platforms that we thought was like one of the more like less important Wikimedia projects, Wikisource, where you put digitized publications, where you can do transcriptions. This platform is actually more important in big parts of the world than we would think, and we see it in the statistics. Wikisource is super important, has also high use and high views and high downloads in India, for instance. We also saw it recently in the Arabic world. There's also high level of downloads of digitized and transcribed stuff from Wikisource. So that's a tendency that we see that, okay, when we look at the world at large, we might want to work on different tactics with other kinds of communities than we are used to here in more privileged regions, I would say. Another tendency that we see, and I'm very excited to see this happening, is the interest in smaller languages and the interest in decolonization. And I'm just showcasing a project here that I actually don't know very intimately, but I'm really curious to see how it develops, is that some of the chapters, the Wikimedia chapters here in the Nordic countries are starting a project to work with the Sami communities here in Scandinavia. And the collaboration, as I understand it, is really both about making their language more available online, making their language more languages. It's actually multiple languages more prominent, but also decolonization of material that is in heritage collections. Rewriting captions that are maybe racist or that have, you know, colonial connotations to them. So it's actually, again, this idea of dialogue with communities and talking with communities and working with them, and them having some kind of ownership also over materials that are about them. Additional challenges are more in the sphere of infrastructure. So going back maybe to the first part of movement strategy in the Wikimedia movement. And I'm taking a step back and looking at the work that my team is doing together with many other teams and many other groups around the world in the upcoming year. We are going to work on both kind of two sides of a coin. We are going to work on helping the Open GLAM movement become more prominent and make its values more clear, and on one side, and we are going to work on technical infrastructure on the other side. What we actually want to do is, we've seen that we have had in the past 10 years and maybe a bit longer, many very exciting and interesting collaborations and projects going on. But what we want to do is actually give this a push and make this all more professional and really give it more of a strong foundation. And how we plan to do that is, one of them is actually with our fantastic partner Wikimedia Sweden. We are doing a kickoff year to start thinking about a better technical infrastructure for GLAM Wiki collaborations. If you have been doing projects with us, and if you ever had, have done any uploads to Wikimedia Commons, or you've seen statistics of your impact on Wikimedia Commons, all of the tools, or many of the tools that you have used for that are volunteer-built tools. That's actually great about the Wikimedia movement. We also have a very active developer community, or volunteer developer community, but that has a backside that all of this is quite unstable and not professionally supported. And actually what we are doing the upcoming year is work together with Wikimedia Sweden to actually make sure that Wikimedia Sweden becomes the center of expertise, in fact, and that Wikimedia Sweden will become the organization that will professionally start to develop this technology. Yeah, we think Sweden is best placed to do this in the movement at this point because of the long-term experience they have with collaborations with organizations like yours. They have experience with software development. They have access to good funding. So the coming year we are going to especially do a year of scoping and a year of research, but we already hope to start doing some piloting as well. And you will see that Wikimedia Sweden will start growing its team also to get on with these new challenges. The upcoming year is also very much going to be about consultation, asking you as a community, what you think are the biggest needs. We are going to look at the whole landscape of the whole process. This is just preparation. The whole process of the kinds of collaborations that you do with us, like, you contribute material to our platforms. How can we help you do that? How can we help you prove the impact of working with our platforms? So we want to look at this entire workflow, but we also want to have the conversation with you, actually with the global community of GLAM Wiki practitioners. Where are the biggest needs? What are the first opportunities that we can take in starting to develop better technical infrastructure for that? So you will hear from us, and by all means, we already had some conversations with people about this at the conference here. Come to us. John, the ED of Wikimedia Sweden, is there in the middle of the space. He's close to you, so I think you might have his phone number, so you can also just go to him and talk to him. Both of us, we will make sure that the conversation will be continued, but we will also have a strategy to reach out to you actively. A second part is, I'm actually just going to hint at it because Douglas McCarthy is going to talk about this more. Oh no, I'm sorry, I'm missing one. I just want to alert you to an initiative that Creative Commons is going to do as well. Creative Commons internationally, the developers of the licenses that we all build upon so much. Creative Commons has ambitions to do more technical development, including a project that will help cultural institutions to assess which materials in their collections are public domain or not, based on all the copyright information around them, but also to help reusers of information to determine whether material is public domain or not, or they can use the material. And it looks like it's still in its very early planning stages, but it looks like Wikimedia and Wikimedia platforms will also be a big component in that, and especially Wikidata, because Wikidata holds quite interesting information for around that is helpful in determining copyright of works, like date of death of authors, publication dates of works, etc., etc. So this is something just to watch out for. It's still at its very early stages, but it's also something that we want to strengthen the collaboration with Creative Commons in general, and we really hope to work together more on like overarching technical projects that hopefully will help the sector. And this is the one where I actually point to Douglas McCARTHY. Another thing that we hope to do this year and that we have supported from a Wikimedia Foundation is we want to have support for renewed Open GLAM Principles or an Open GLAM Declaration. You might be familiar with the Budapest Open Access Declaration, which was launched in 2002. I just checked it on my phone, and which was actually seminal in putting open access scientific publishing on the agenda. We don't have anything similar in the GLAM world. There is something similar in the education world. There are many, in fact, of these declarations in the open access publishing world. In the Open GLAM world, we don't have such a document that really has this political power. And we actually want to produce that this year. And there's already been a lot of preparation about it. I will leave it to Douglas to talk about it. We also have a big feedback period about the document that is being drafted. We're looking for signatories in the upcoming year. Basically, this is the old principles that have been drafted in 2013, and maybe many of you have already seen these. We want to modernize these and make them up to date and make them really into a document that we as the sector can use to make our point about the value of open. And yeah, we as the Wikimedia Foundation, we help that project a bit, but we also have partners like Europeana standing behind it. We have many advocates within the community. And I mean, yeah, we welcome everyone's feedback at this point. It's an open editorial process. That's kind of it. At least that's the challenge that I have seen so far and my team has seen so far, but maybe there are questions from the audience and from ERIK.
Wow, that was kind of overwhelming. You do a lot of work. But I just have a first question before I hand over the mic to Merete. How can, I mean, from your point of view, from the Wikimedia Foundation point of view, how can we as cultural heritage institutions improve our data and presence on Wikimedia?
I think you're already doing a fantastic job. I think our communities are super active in the sense that they are super curious about what's going on there, and they're already on the lookout. So as long as you publish stuff, they will already find it. But it's of course better if it's very clearly licensed, if it's well structured. So all these things help, of course. And I think active collaboration with Wikimedia platforms, like working with your local chapter on indeed doing like active image donations, that will of course help more. So the more proactive that you are, the better. But I think even just publishing, if you're a super small museum, even just publishing an Excel sheet, saying it's CC0, will already also help our you know, our volunteers. I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah. Oh, can it become too large? I think so, yeah. I don't think you want Wikimedia to become, and I'm saying that as a Wikimedian, to become this big, you know. That's also why we are pushing towards Wikibase as an ecosystem where it's not just Wikidata that collects all the data, but we have an ecosystem where many different knowledge bases work together in a very good way and in a distributed way. So by all means, no. Let it not become too large. I think Wikimedia platforms have a function of indeed having this dialogue with communities, but on the other hand, I think you as institutions also have your own function in being the experts of your own knowledge and having your own platforms for that. I don't know if that kind of hints at what you were hinting at in your question, but
kind of a rhetorical
yeah,
question,
yeah.
That's the answer.
Good. Yeah, excellent.
Thanks, Sandra, for your commitment to creating a knowledge base where we can all be included. And also it was interesting to hear about the vision for 2030 to ensure that Wikipedia overcomes some of these biases that is impeding the inclusiveness that is the vision. I noticed in the Sami project that you call for especially experts in these languages to help enrich the knowledge base of these indigenous languages. I was wondering if you can reflect on the relationship in the Wikipedia ecosystem between you know, the administrators who look after the regulations and the principles that all should be equal, and the experts are actually not privileged in Wikipedia, and then actually needing subject experts to raise the bar for certain knowledge areas. Because we're bumping into this in the Wikilabs culture collaboration, where some administrators are not too happy that some people claim expertise in a field of knowledge.
That's a great question. For clarity, I'm not personally involved in the Sami project, while I'm a super big fan of it. If you want to know more about how it's organized, I think it's best to talk to people involved with the Nordic Wikimedia chapters. I know Finland and Sweden are active in it, and Norway as well. So for that specific, like, detailed question, in your general question about a role of experts versus Wikimedia volunteers who are administrators and might have issues with what you post there, yeah, we already talked about it yesterday, right? It's a hard one. I also look at it with my volunteer hat on, working as a volunteer for the Gender Gap Working Group in the Netherlands, and we also have this issue, right? Administrators, like long-set administrators on English, on Dutch Wikipedia, for instance, contesting that a certain woman is notable enough for Wikipedia. My advice is, well, with one leg being an art expert and the other leg being a volunteer, but both legs being a community member of Wikimedia, is engage in the discussion. Be there, engage in the discussion. Also be aware of the policies of Wikipedia, just like, you know, scientific publishing or any field where you will publish, it has its policies. Be aware of those and play with them. Wikipedias often have the needs or have the request that you offer reliable sources. Make sure that you're prepared to have these, but also make sure that you are there in the discussions on Wiki about these topics. I've noticed that when you have these discussions in a civilized and in a productive way, that often you get your point across. At least that's our experience in the Netherlands. For one, I really, really welcome experts. That's my personal vision. I really am happy when experts participate in our projects because they help to elevate the content of what is there, and they help to bring good knowledge. But it's really about not just going there and saying, I'm the expert, but it's really about this dialogue. I think that's a super important thing. I don't know if there's other Wikimedians in the room that want to respond to that, because I now feel very much like representing the community while only one person, but yeah.
Thank you, Sandra. I think we've all earned some coffee at this point. So enjoy your coffee, and I'll see you all back here at 3:30. Thank you. All right. Back for the last session. We have 2 lightning talks, and then our queen Merete takes the stage, and then we're out of here. First we have Susanna from from Finland. It's been a long day. You're going to talk about a very interesting project, Wikidocumentaries. Yeah, and actually we saw this when we were in Finland. When was it? Last year. Really interesting.
Thank you. I am Susanna ÅNÄS. I work with Wikimedia projects as well in general, and I've been working on this project called Wikidocumentaries since last year. It's a collaboration with several organizations and associations, volunteer, amateur historians, so to speak. It's supposed to be a micro-history wiki for citizen historians. It is based on the information that is there on Wikimedia platforms, and then it is going through GLAMs to find their content in that for that specific data. So I will try to walk you through the basics of how this is constructed in these few minutes that I have. So this is the birthday of Hagar Olsson, the Finnish author, the Finnish writer, and here I'm showing how this website can display the same information. It can navigate all of Wikimedia information in all of the languages, display the similar information in all of the languages, except for the articles here, which are Wikipedia articles. They come from that language, Wikipedia, so they are different. But otherwise, all this data is based on Wikidata, and everything that is displayed on the page is similar in all of the languages. So this is what, just if you want to read this, you can go home and read this, but these are there here to remind me what I should say. So this is a mock-up to show maybe in more fancy layout how it's supposed to be. There are different components that can be shown. Here is from the end to the beginning, like a timeline, a map, works, images from repositories, etc. And here is the same live. Here you can see this is you can follow the link from Hagar Olsson to Edith Södergran, and here are images of Edith Södergran from FLYNN, which is the Finnish aggregator. Here you see them from Flickr and European, and we also have a Creative Commons search there. Probably not any of them from there this time. And again, the idea is that in this Wikimedia infrastructure, there is the data that is in Wikidata, and for each one of the items in Wikidata, there can be a page. But Wikidata has its limitations, as Sandra was saying. Not everything is supposed to be in Wikidata. Therefore, there is the idea of this Wikibase environment where there are local knowledge bases that connect to Wikidata in this federated Wikibase environment. And this is supposed to be one node in that environment, providing information that is, let's say, too non-notable, too private, too detailed in history. And why is history? I was saying that it's micro-history and not micro-present, because we have to deal with also personality rights, etc. We cannot be, I don't know, a gossip page. So from this, this is just saying it again. All this data that is produced on this site is going back to the Wikimedia projects. So in a way, this becomes a huge loop. GLAMs providing information, people working on this site, and this site then pushing this data back to Wikimedia projects. Here's one example. There's this image. Now we are again going from the end to the beginning. So this is the same Hagar Olsson, and we have this metadata from the GLAM, and we can associate it with the concepts in Wikidata, and we can actually build a base. Well, this will be, well, it's not in action yet, it's not in use, but this is the user interface for it. So we will be able, through this, it will be possible to associate a whole vocabulary in a certain collection to Wikidata concepts. So boldly, we can say that it's a place for crowdsourcing everything, but let's put it in test. What it means here is that we hope it's going to be a platform for different tools to work with content from all over, from the users themselves and from the GLAMs. And here's one example, which would be that you could geolocate images. You could first associate it with the place, and the item in Wikidata would know the place roughly, and then you could go to more precise tools to give the specific location. You could also connect this with a rephotography app, and that's been also in the plans. So this is not something that we've entered at all yet, but the idea is that they can, well, why the name is Wikidocumentaries, it's documentaries being collections of documents that are put in the format of narratives. So the narratives are either forming themselves or people are doing them, like voluntarily and purposefully. And we work together with the different communities. And here's one of the latest. We work with a garden allotment garden museum, and this is just to say that there are already pilots going on with it, although I want to say that this is very much a work in progress. Well, thank you very much. It says 7:59, 8 minutes.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? Thank you. What a privilege it is to be here with you. This has been an amazing couple of days so far. So thank you to Susanna and all of the previous speakers, because I'm walking away with a lot of inspiration and energy from this. So I hope you are too. In the next few minutes, because this is a lightning talk, I'd like to share with you some work in progress. And I want to say immediately that this presentation has many more questions than answers. So if you're looking for simple answers to things, then this is not the talk for you, okay? But everyone in this room can help us answer these questions together. So I'm collections manager at Europeana, and I didn't bring the hat with me. Sorry about that. I've been working in cultural heritage, in museums, in private art collections for the last 15, 20 years. I've been on the licensing side, I've been in private, I've been in not-for-profit, I've been in the public sector. So I like to think that when I talk about open access and museums and content, that I've been on most sides of the table. I've just tweeted out the link to this slide deck, just for your reference. So if you follow me as CultureDoug or use the ShareX hashtag, then you'll find my slide share. So what is Open GLAM? Well, that's a very open question, and I like to think of it as a community and as a movement. Now, we could say that it is a community, maybe it's a space, it could be a digital or a physical space like this, and it could be a set of shared values. So what are these Open GLAM principles? Now, Sandra gave a wonderful trailer, thank you, earlier, so I won't represent the concept of this, but I do want to say that what we are doing right now, and this is work in progress, is we're looking to update the Open GLAM principles that were created in 2013. Now, the character of these was quite licensing focused and quite sort of metadata and data standards focused, and that was incredibly valuable and still is. However, I think what we've heard over the last 2 days shows us that there are, for example, ethical concerns that we would like to add to these principles, to layer on top of those, so that we can come up with a set of principles and a reference point, really, that helps us see open access and Open GLAM not purely in a mechanistic way, but also in an ethical and a modern sense. So to find out what was missing, we created a survey. We wanted to know, are the principles still accurate and relevant, and really what's not there that should be included. The survey was conducted earlier this year, and we had 109 responses. If you'd like to dig into the details, then I recommend visiting Sandra's Medium post, which is linked here. But I would like to share with you one or two verbatim responses, which I think are relevant. So someone said, information with personal culture and social constraints, such as traditional forms of knowledge, should not be just released. And Andrea spoke very eloquently about that yesterday. And we do require some acknowledgement of the complexities of cultural knowledge. Greater emphasis must be placed on the human rights perspective. We know that access to cultural heritage is a right enshrined in several human rights charters and declarations. And as part of this work, we'll be looking to align the Open GLAM principles with these other existing charters. Open Data and Open Knowledge Foundation, etc., are not relevant organizations in the cultural field. So the principles need to be supported by relevant organizations to our sector. And we'd like to have guidelines and values to discuss, to build up a better structure and develop a network for this topic. So please, all of you, help us answer these questions. How do we make the principles relevant to GLAM institutions? What would make the principles endorsable by your institution, and what are important arguments to adopt them? How can the principles help to advance the conversation about open access to cultural heritage? So linked here are two key documents which are a work in progress, and they are open for you to explore, to comment, to add your thoughts and ideas. We have an Open GLAM declaration document, and there is in very early stages, there will be a white paper coming out on this subject, which we expect to surface later this year. And our current thinking about this is that the final declaration, the updated Open GLAM principles, would be promoted and published at the Creative Commons Summit in Lisbon in May next year. If you'd like to add your voice to Open GLAM and the wider global community, then please be aware that the opportunity is open to you through the Open GLAM Twitter account, and you can sign up to curate and contribute your thoughts in a 2-week period, and there's a link to sign up right here. And also be aware that we recently created a Medium publication to gather together writings about Open GLAM from the global community. Every language is accepted. We already have articles in 4 or 5 languages and pieces from some of the leading writers about Open GLAM, some of whom are in this room. So if you have something that's relevant to this topic and this community, then please get in touch with me and I can walk you through it, and we can get your work and ideas shared through Medium. So with that, I'll say thank you very much, and let's keep in touch.
Perfect. Thank you. I can start by saying, first of all, thank you for staying here all day, right to the very end. I was curious how many would stay awake. So thanks also, Douglas, for keeping us cheered up with some nice pictures. The reason for this title is probably familiar to many of you, because we want to transform the world with culture is the vision of Europeana. And my talk today, I talked with Karin about this when she invited me to end this conference. And I thought that it would be hopefully interesting and appropriate to close the many great discussions and inspiring cases and studies we've seen over the past 2 days with lifting our vision to the big sort of scope of trying to go forward as a sector of cultural heritage institutions in Europe. So that's what I'm going to talk to you about. But before I start, I would like to say how honored I am and have been to take part in this conference. This Sharing is Caring started in 2011 as a really sort of spontaneous small thing in Copenhagen. And to see how the idea, the notion of sharing is caring has caught on, and to see brilliant people like Karin and ERIK and Anna and the other Karin pick up the baton and really raise the level of sharing is caring to this super reflected discussions we've been having with each other the past 2 days is really something that just makes me so proud. One of the things that we got as feedback for the very first 2011 Sharing is Caring conference was, okay, enough with the celebrating that we're opening the data. Let's get more critical. And I think that is one of the things that has been so brilliant about the past 2 days, is the willingness and the opportunity to discuss the difficulties, the complexities of opening up the data that we hold in our collections. So thank you for that. I'd like to make it clear that my talk here, I have both my own institution's logo and Europeana's logo, because I'm sort of speaking in sort of different capacities here. And I just wanted to make that clear from the beginning, that I work at the National Gallery of Denmark, Statens Museum for Kunst in Copenhagen. In my capacity as a curator of digital museum practice, I've been very fortunate to have a lot of interaction and collaboration with Europeana over the years, and I'll come back to that in my talk, make that more precise. But this talk is not going to be about Europeana, but it's going to be about how Europeana can be a facilitator for a digital transformation for all of our institutions, for our sector at large. But that only will happen when and if we all join forces under that umbrella. So how can we transform the world with open culture? And also I should say, another spoiler, that I won't give any specific answers to this, but I will try to reflect on some of the frameworks we can use as a sector to get closer to working out the solutions for this. In 2010, my professional world kind of changed. I'd been working at SMK for 3 years and had gotten really interested in the changes of museum practice, of cultural heritage practice that the internet brought about. And then Europeana, a fairly young institution that I was starting to hear about all over the place, issued the Public Domain Charter. In it, it was stated that digitization of public domain content does not create new rights over it. Works that are in the public domain in analog form continue to be in the public domain once they have been digitized. To me, that was like, boom. Yes, this is so logical, this is so true. This is exactly what I had been sort of intuitively trying to hone in on in my own work. At the National Gallery in Copenhagen,
If you haven't been, please stop by. We have one of these big National Gallery type collections of around 250,000 works. And the great thing is that about 2/3 of that collection is in the public domain. So there's a lot of potential. And one of the early things we did in my time at the museum was to formulate our first digital strategy, establishing that we aspire to become a catalyst for our users' creativity. And the instruments to try and start that process was to begin opening up our collection in digital form. The first sort of dip of the toe was in 2012, where we released 160 highlights from our collection under the CC BY license and tested the waters and figured what's going to happen now. And we were so positive about the outcomes of that we were spurred on to formulate an overall public domain policy for our collection in 2015, where we embraced the rightful public domain dedication for our collection that's in the public domain, following the Europeana Public Domain Charter and referencing that in our online collection. So you can say it's pretty obvious why I wanted to contribute to Europeana's vision. And I've been doing that in many different capacities. The first thing being to join a task force in 2012, working out the framework for working with Europeana as a cultural commons, then being elected into the new democratic governance system of a members' council of network members, serving there for 4 years, eventually becoming the chair of the Europeana Network Association, which was a fantastic privilege and learning process. Also working in different task forces, for instance, the impact framework, which I'll come back to. And then after 2 terms on the members' council, my time ran out. And then I was appointed by the Europeana Network Association to be their representative in the European Commission's Digital Cultural Heritage and Europeana expert group. So that's where I serve today, no longer sort of part of Europeana as such, but representing all of you. Probably many of you are members of the Europeana network, and being a voice for the network towards the Commission and the member states. So the first 5 years of Europeana, from around its launch and until the strategy that is currently in use, the 2015 to 20 strategy, the first 5 years of Europeana's work was a lot about aggregating, accumulating data as much as possible from as many data providers as possible, to just build up a data set with a volume that established that we have something we can call a European gateway into all of our cultural heritage here. But it was not just about accumulating the data. The vision behind that, the drive behind that, was always to create critical mass, a diverse mass of cultural heritage knowledge and material that would eventually bring value to users. And just quoting from, this is not from the strategy, the original strategy 2015 to 20, but from the strategic update that was like 2 years into the strategic period. It's established here that in 2020, Europeana will have contributed to the aims of the European Union to foster unity and diversity, smart inclusive growth, and a digital single market. So these being some of the high-level ambitions of the European Union that Europeana as the cultural heritage platform will contribute to achieve. We will have increased the feeling of a shared European identity through cultural heritage for European citizens. Cultural heritage will be used and enjoyed across national borders for work, learning, or pleasure, because we will have developed and implemented interoperable standards, frameworks, and intellectual property rights that make it work. We will have increased the quality and usability of digital cultural heritage with a powerful network of game changers from Europe's cultural sector. The idea with the current strategy has been to make Europeana into a multi-sided platform where Europeana's data and instruments at the core serve different strategic markets, being the cultural heritage professionals, the various creative industries that can take the data and build stuff with it, and also end users, being researchers, educators, etc., that can take the data and use them in different meaningful contexts. Now, what we've seen over the cycle of this strategic period is that going from aggregating and accumulating big masses of data to actually executing on the grand vision that I've just referred to has not been uncomplicated. And the Commission, representatives from various stakeholders, member states, aggregators, data providers, users of Europeana have uttered critique of the way that data can be accessed, the way it's linked together, the way the search results that are returned, etc. So the evaluations that have been going on of Europeana has pointed that there's a need to keep developing how Europeana lives its vision. In 2016, there was a focus in the Dutch European presidency on digital cultural heritage. And the council conclusions from that presidency came out with recommendations about Europeana and digital cultural heritage. And these council conclusions acknowledged that Europeana had indeed succeeded in coordinating the efforts of cultural heritage institutions across Europe, stimulated capacity building, developed shared standards, and effectively improved access to Europe's cultural heritage. So at the baseline of this is the acknowledgement that it's better to have a shared platform where we can go and co-create standards for the sector instead of all of us trying to invent the wheel for how to work with data, how to work with users, how to work with rights. And some of the things that have come out of Europeana, which is very deeply acknowledged by the evaluations, is, for instance, the Europeana data model, the Europeana publishing framework, rightstatements.org, that advises cultural heritage institutions on how to adopt licenses to their digitized materials, etc. But there were also agreement across the board that there are some pain points to work on. So the interoperability of data is far from perfect. The quality and findability of content in the portal can be much improved. The user experience needs to be more engaging to actually get European citizens to find the value and meaning in using Europeana. And it needs to be much easier and more rewarding for us, the data providers, the cultural institutions, to spend time and energy and resources in ingesting our data into Europeana. Following the council conclusions, there was an open call out to stakeholders all over Europe to take part in a big evaluation of Europeana, where everyone from end users in these different markets to data providers, to network members, to politicians and funders could let their voice be heard. And again, there was acknowledgement that Europeana is relevant to EU needs and priorities as it provides added value by creating a network of experts and cultural heritage institutions, enables European cooperation, as well as improves the availability and reuse of European cultural heritage across sectors and national borders. So the fact that a network was created as a huge new sort of addition to Europeana, the search base, has highly raised the value of Europeana in the eyes of stakeholders. Europeana is much more than the almost 60 million data posts that has been aggregated. Europeana is the place where we come together to try and tackle shared challenges and figure out shared solutions. And that has enormous value for the European Commission. Also, it's acknowledged that Europeana is coherent with the national strategies of EU member states. Europeana addresses challenges that the EU member states face in relation to digitizing cultural heritage and digitally transforming access to culture. So what has effectively come out of these council conclusions and consultations with the cultural heritage sector of Europe is that the European Commission and the member states that have the cultural institutions where all of us work and have an interest in making decisions about how we work together. Those two parts are now taking on more responsibility strategically to solve the problems that we have acknowledged that exist in Europeana. And that's leading to the work to formulate a new strategy after 2020. And that is what we're doing right now. Tomorrow I'm flying to Luxembourg for a meeting in this Digital Cultural Heritage and Europeana expert group, where we are over a couple of years iterating, discussing and planning the next strategy for Europeana. So this is taking place right now. One of the big shifts in this strategy, based on the evaluations of Europeana, is that the multi-sided platform is seen to be too big a mouthful for one strategy, to serve different markets and having to invest equal amounts of energy in all of them is one of the things that the Commission has asked Europeana to really challenge and rethink. So what we're seeing at the moment is a strategy that is honing in on Europeana focusing on a core target group being you, the cultural heritage institutions. And the idea is to do that through working intently with the content partners and the community, the aggregators and the network. So in my abstract for today's talk, I asked 4 questions that I was going to reflect on in my presentation. And these 4 questions are the ones that we take as our starting point in developing this new strategy. So why in the first place have we digitized European cultural heritage? Well, in order to create the large impact that Europeana wishes to have and that we as players in Europeana wish to have, it's crucial that we get our content digitized, that our data is actually accessible. So even though the digitization and aggregation of all this data is not the end goal, it's still a fundamental stepping stone to actually achieve impact. And as you can see from this graph, we're quite far from that target still. So the strategy needs to still reinforce that digitization and making accessible as openly as possible our collections is key to achieve the strategy. So what do we hope to achieve by digitizing our collections as a sector? That's established and remains true in the existing strategy that Europeana started as a big political idea to unite Europe through culture by making our heritage available to all for work, learning or pleasure. A deeply felt belief that our shared cultural heritage fundamentally belongs to all of us, and it's therefore too important to leave to market forces alone to digitize and make available. So what Europeana is really doing is filling a gap in the current offer to the citizens of Europe in terms of providing free and non-commercial platform for our shared cultural heritage. But that requires a digital transformation to achieve. But who is it that we aim to transform? This is where this new strategic shift kicks in and becomes tangible. The end goal of Europeana is obviously still to transform the world, all of us, the citizens that we serve as cultural institutions, through cultural experiences, knowledge, and interaction. But the way we're going to try and approach that in the coming years is through ensuring a digital transformation kicks in cultural heritage institutions all over Europe. So the main target group is now, as I said, you, me, all of us, as a vehicle to try and make this positive contribution to European societies. And then the next obvious question is, how do we demonstrate that this vision is actually starting to turn into reality? This has been the key question of one of these task forces that I've served on over the past couple of years, the Impact Task Force. And the question here is elaborated a bit on by Harry Verwijn, the director of Europeana, in a blog post where he says, if you work in a purpose-driven non-profit organization, and more specifically in the digital cultural heritage sector, we share a problem. We should be feeling fine and dandy because we work for a great cause, but we have very few instruments at our disposal to assess the results of our actions and be happy about it. The initial response that has come out of tackling this question is that we have sat together in a task force and co-created an impact framework for trying to be more specific about the social contribution that digitizing all of our collections actually bring to society, to people. And the Impact Playbook is conceived as a cookbook that all of us can take and flip through and find recipes on how to actually try and make concrete what all of our efforts is amounting to. And I'll just show you a quick video to give you an idea of, I hope. No? It's here on my screen, but it's not on yours. Anyway. Yeah? No? To the right? No? Sorry. Thanks. Yeah, do we want a full screen? We do. You ready? And let's see if I can do this all by myself. So I'm curious if this rings a bell to you, that if you've come across the need to actually be able to prove more than how many clicks to your website or how many downloads of images, but what difference did it make to people that they got access to this? What did they use it for? How did it change their ways of working and their abilities to teach or to do research or be more gratified in their social lives or whatever? And these things are so difficult to answer. And I think for that reason, many of us have never really tried to find structured ways to do that. But I think we are also facing a time right now where it's more and more demanded of us that we can legitimize why we keep investing in having cultural heritage institutions in collecting and preserving all this stuff? What's it good for? Aren't there better ways to spend money in society? We have to have answers for that. So this is to make more tangible what kinds of standards it is that Europeana is trying to develop on behalf of our sector, and in very accessible formats where you can just like download this playbook for free, get all the tools, start using it yourselves. The core idea is, as it says in the strategy, that our sector is trying to transform the world with culture, and then looking into various areas where we don't usually look for the kind of impact we have. We're more used to looking at our impact for specific sectors like education or possibly through partnerships, some tech companies, etc. But how are we influencing people's lives, health, social cohesion in society, etc.? How are we influencing the economy of society through the contribution we make, etc.? It's also important to state what we really mean by impact, because this is where we can hold ourselves accountable and look at what is it really that we bring to society. So we have formulated that it's changes that occur for the specific stakeholders that we define in society as a result of activities for which we are accountable. And an important tool in the impact framework is the change pathway, which is adapted from similar tools that you find in other sectors. The whole impact playbook is based on a big research project conducted by Simon Tanner at the King's College in London, where he looked at different impact assessment frameworks, for instance, in the health industry, in tech industry, etc. And then we have co-created a version that is tailor-made for the cultural sector. So this change pathway is something where, I mean, we're not unfamiliar with this exercise, right? We're used to looking at a new project, a new initiative, and saying, okay, we have some stakeholders, resources, we'll start some activities, let's see what happens. But the interesting idea with the change pathway is to challenge our ability to evaluate and follow up on the things that we set in motion. This is not something that we're especially great at in the cultural heritage sector. We're often finishing a project and then on to the next thing. But the impact framework encourages us to think more in cycles and always look at the results, the outcomes of what we've been doing, and feed those into the next iteration. So instead of going sort of bottom up, why not start by looking at the impact that we wish to have, and then work our way back at what are the products we need to produce, what are the activities we need to set in motion, what stakeholders do we need to get on board. This whole initiative is an attempt to try and create a common language in the cultural heritage sector to better understand and articulate what it is that all of our efforts amount to in society and take ownership of that. So to sum up, the main strategic shift that you'll see become implemented in Europeana in the way we work is going from providing access to cultural heritage to making that access really matter, to make it relevant to people. And I'd like to end my presentation because, as I said, we're in the middle of this process. And I'll be in a meeting Thursday to continue discussing this. So I thought maybe some of you have some input that I can bring to the table in the European Commission when it comes to formulating from the viewpoint of our sector, what is the main thing that we need Europeana to achieve after 2020? So instead of you asking me questions, I'm asking you.
Anyone?
So, yeah, I thank you so much because this is really great. And we were joking earlier because Merete always has the best questions. So I was like, I'm really going to come up with some good ones. But then you turned it on us. I think something that, and we saw this also with Thomas's presentation in terms of why institutions maybe don't make certain things available is potentially, and I was going to ask you about this, something that we need to confront. It's just that fear of loss of control around the collection and the digital forms of the collections. And I know in some of the commission recommendation or the reports about the implementation of the commission recommendation around public domain works, like the research continues to show that that's like one of the main things that are holding institutions back. And it's that attitude around fear of loss of control. And so my question to you is going to be, how do we get those institutions to kind of step out of their comfort areas or to take that leap of faith, because it seems to be like there's a certain amount that just continue to have a bit of a hold up. So I don't know if that's something that maybe the working group would be, exploring in terms of how to change that attitude. But that's, I guess, my question and my comment.
Thanks so much, Andrea. And yes, that is one of the key things that we continue to explore. You're spot on. That is a very real concern, and I had the iceberg image before that just demonstrates it very tangibly. I think our approach is twofold, two parallel tracks. One is, and this is something that is formulated in the strategic recommendations that we're working on at the moment, is to acknowledge the diversity of attitudes in the cultural heritage sector and not take that lightly. This requires a lot of patience because, of course, we do mean what we say with, and excuse me, because I keep saying we. When I say we, it's because I'm part of the Europeana network and I feel strongly for the vision, but I don't work for Europeana, just to state that clearly. So there's an urgency to actually achieve the digital transformation we're talking about if we want to keep being a relevant offer to the public we serve. And there's a recognition of that. At the same time, you can't force that down the throat of institutions that are not ready for it. So the two tracks is to acknowledge and be patient that these transformations take time, and acknowledge that institutions around Europe are transforming into a digital era at different paces, but at the same time offer hubs, knowledge centers, activities for our target group, the cultural heritage institutions, where you can get tools for that digital transformation. Because I don't see any institutions not wanting to keep up with development. They want to do it in a way where they feel like they have their heart in it.
Thank you, Merete, for an inspiring talk, as always. Something that I personally, working for Europeana, as you know, would like to see post-2020 our strategy is framing the mission more in a global sense. I think naturally, given our our funding and the focus of our funders, it's very sort of Eurocentric in terms of audience. But as we've talked about a lot these last 2 days, so many of the collections which we all are responsible for, we work with and we love, are from outside of Europe and other parts of the world. And I'd really like to see Europeana embrace more of a truly global vision in terms of audience. And I can tell you that looking at the metrics for Europeana collections, a huge percentage of our traffic is from outside of this continent. So I'd love to see Europeana really embrace on a strategic level that global purpose and vision in terms of audience and engagement.
Great. That's noted.
Hello. To go back to the slide where it shows it's kind of like the rays of different impacts, could you talk about the economic impacts and specifically how can companies make money ethically with cultural content, and specifically how could a French company that maybe hosts 3D content from organizations, how might that work or not?
Thanks for the question, Thomas. I have to disappoint you. No, I don't have a great answer for that, but I think it's a very important question to tackle when we want to use the impact framework as the sort of sounding board for the next strategy. So I'd like to take that question to the table in the ongoing discussions. So if I can answer you like that. Yep. Oh.
I would like to know how non-institutional players fit in, non-institutional cultural heritage players fit into the strategy.
Yeah. So like Wikimedia, for instance? Yeah. Well, I think that it's no secret to anyone in this room that Europeana has been working very closely with Wikimedia for a number of years. And that coming back to this strategic shift, the way that, I mean, what we talk about in this process is that this is not a major transformation of the strategy, but it's an important adjustment to focus our efforts, or to focus Europeana's efforts on making sure that cultural heritage institutions are feeling welcome, that it's rewarding to contribute to Europeana, that it makes sense to invest time and resources. But one of the gratifying things for many institutions will be to channel their content onto platforms like, for instance, Wikimedia. And Europeana can help leverage that through stuff like the tiers of the Europeana publishing framework, where it says the more you give, the more you get. So if you can open up your licensing as much as possible, you'll have much more reach and impact with what you do. So being that sort of I don't know the word in English, but the hub or the thing in a bike wheel. There's this thing that the what?
The hub.
The hub. Okay, I didn't know it was called that. But being that hub and that place where synergies take off. But we are being asked to. I keep saying we. It's an occupational hazard from 4 years in the Europeana Foundation Board. Europeana is asked by the European Commission to be first and foremost there for the sector. Mm-hmm. And Karin has a question or a comment.
Thank you. Yeah, if you go back to the question, and especially after what you said now, that Europeana is meant to be specifically there for the sector, something that I would like to send along is that there should be specific activities to avoid this preaching to the choir syndrome, because I think like events like this, they're wonderful, and they always sort of bring a lot of energy to people that are new to these ideas and so on, and it is the network that will keep the idea alive. And I totally acknowledge what you said, that institutions will need their pace to change, and they will need sort of every institution will need their own their own reason to start walking that path. But some ideas are really sort of abstract to get your head around if you're not moving in this digital cultural heritage sort of bubble already. So I would suggest that there would be specific activities to address this problem in the new strategy.
Yeah, we've played around with ideas of, not for the strategy as such, but maybe for the strategic plan that will sort of materialize the overall strategy of offering like summer schools for like GLAM directors to to get up to speed on the digital developments, having maybe sort of peer-to-peer groups where you can, you know, learn from respected colleagues about what digital transformation means, and how it's not just about digitizing your collection, but about digitizing your mindset as an institution. So, but thank you, noted.
Hello, yes. I really like the idea with the framework and the playbook. But I think the institutions need the politicians to know more. So if you could reach out to the politicians and make some short version for impact for the culture heritage in the political sense, and maybe the global goals or something connecting to the social political level. I think that could help the institutions understand where they are supposed to aim. Because when the statistics don't ask for digital information, we don't have any tools to make this work.
Yes, and this is already happening in, for instance, in the DCHE, where the member states representatives come together twice a year, and we do in our interactions with the representatives from the ministries of culture and etc. Try to forward this agenda that you can't assess the true impact that digitizing our cultural realm has only through clicks. This is not going to cover what this transformation means to society, but it's again, thank you, noted that we can work harder on raising that agenda politically. Yeah, an executive summary. Good idea.
So I have, not sure if it's I think it's a question Europeana needs to answer by 2025 or 2030, especially if it is supposed to have the Cultural Heritage Institution as its main target group, is whether Europeana actually needs Europeana collections, and even if it even has to aggregate anything at all.
I can reveal that this question will be discussed in Luxembourg on Thursday.
It was also a leading question.
What role will Europeana collections play in the next strategy? I don't think we're in a place right now where the Commission or the member states or other stakeholders have a majority in wanting to let go of the collections, but it is definitely time to rethink the role of the aggregated data set in how Europeana spends its resources. Yeah, okay, there's another one.
No, I was just thinking that this preaching to the choir thing has been ongoing for like 10 or 15 years, and looking back, I can sense that maybe we, being an evangelist for open culture, maybe I have scared some people away by being too ambitious. So I suppose one thing for you to do to help the more reluctant institutions is making it really easy for them to take the first few steps. I think that you and I met the first time at Open Knowledge Festival in Helsinki.
Yeah. In 2012.
Yeah, it's ages. But then I remember that you talked about that you weren't allowed to give open licenses to the first image sets that you released. So you had to open them first.
That was the CC BY.
With stricter licenses. But then when the institution saw how it moved along, you could step forward and make it more open over time. Or the example that Jill gave on choosing one segment of the collection and work hard on that. I think that makes it maybe easier for smaller or more insecure institutions to get going.
Thanks. Yeah, absolutely. And it's this preaching to the choir problem is. I had a nice sort of different perspective on that recently, where I was in a like cultural political debate in Denmark. So it was a completely different context, and we were talking about. The significance of having museums, libraries, and archives in society. And one of the members of the audience raised his hand and said, yeah, but if you really want to bring that question up, you need to bring it to someone else than the people sitting in this room, because we already made the decision to come to a museum to take part in a debate on this topic, so we're already engaged. But there was then a member of the panel who said, no, you're the perfect people for this discussion because you are the amplifiers. And I think we shouldn't forget that we have a power, we have a possibility to go out and to learn from each other in settings like this, and then go out and talk to our colleagues who don't already have insight into digital transformation and how that's affecting the way we work and the impact we can have as a sector. That doesn't mean we shouldn't also try to transgress the circles that we move in, but every one of us have networks that go beyond the choir, you can say.
You got a lot of answers on that one.
Yeah, and I feel like really thanking you for engaging in this discussion at such a late point in the afternoon and after a talk that was not exactly one of the most funny ones during these 2 days. It was a little bit sort of, okay, strategy, 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So thank you very much for staying here.
So do you want to do a little bridge over to the
I do.
next event?
Can I invite you onto stage, Trineke? Because you have something to look forward to very soon.
Thank you, Merete. I'm Trineke from the Rijksmuseum, and I really like to announce the next Sharing is Caring extension event, and it will be in Amsterdam in our museum. Our theme will be Expand the Source, which means that after opening up our collection data, we would like to address the next challenges of opening up more data, and then you have to think about research data. We are now at this very moment hard working on the program yet. The registration is open, so you can check the website, Sharing is Caring, and our Rijksmuseum website. Please registrate, please submit your lightning talks, and
yeah, we really hope our conference will be as much as inspiring as these 2 days were. Thanks to Karin, thanks to ERIK, thanks to Merete, tack så mycket. And hope to see you in Amsterdam.
Yeah, thanks for running another conference there. It's fantastic. So why don't we give them a hand? Yeah.
Thank you. So we're actually coming to an end here soon. Pretty nice to go home or just relax for a while, and kind of sad as well, because this has been a great gathering. I've had a lot of fun. My head is empty now. And I would just like to thank Merete again for coming up with this idea in the first place in 2011, and for everyone who has been carrying the torch ever since in the different iterations of this conference. And I would also like to invite up Karin Losseman, who has been Karin made this possible.
Thank you, Eric, but that's not true. We all made this possible. You made this possible. Sara, Linnea here made this possible. The other Karin, where are you? Are you still here? She's not. Okay. You made this possible by running a Sharing is Caring event in Hamburg two years ago. And yeah, Merete, thank you for coming up with the idea in the first place and keeping this on. When I opened 2 days ago, I said I wouldn't want to go back to 7 years ago when I started working at the National Museum, but now I thought I actually want to share one moment with you, because in 2012, when I had been working there for a couple of months, we had an internal analysis about how we're going to handle our images. And the result of this really huge analysis was that there's one thing we're absolutely not going to do, and that is sharing it under a CC BY license, because we can't do this. And what I want to tell you is institutions can change. It will take time, and you will have to repeat your arguments a lot, but it can actually change. So,
and it's up to us to do it.
Yes, exactly. So I think with that, we can end those fantastic 2 days. Thank you to all the speakers. And yes, just because I want to remind you of, or tell you another thing, because there is a new Sharing is Caring event in Amsterdam coming up already in November.